Founder of Search Engine Journal, and welcome to today's SEJ Marketing Think Tank. With me, I'm going to have Erin Everhart from the Home Depot, and she'll really be talking about hitting the right audiences with user experience essentials. So say hi, Erin.
Hey guys.
Before Erin gets started, I just want to do some basic housekeeping with the SEJ Marketing Think Tank. So first of all, thanks for everyone for attending today. It's great to see the amount that we have here, and you're really going to get some great information on integrating everything from a UX perspective into your digital marketing. The official hashtag for today is hashtag SEJ Think Tank. This is our first SEJ Think Tank webinar of 2016. So we're really hitting off the year fantastically. As you'll see on the GoToWebinar control panel, you have a question box. While the think tank is going on, please submit your questions that you have for Erin. Then at the end of her presentation, we'll be doing a Q&A session where we'll be picking the questions that we can fit into that timeline, typically 10 to 15 minutes, to answer. And then afterwards, we'll be answering any questions and sending out the answers via email and whatnot. You can answer or ask questions directly through the GoToWebinar control panel or via Twitter using hashtag SEJ Think Tank. Also, we'll be launching 2 polls during the webinar. Please feel free to answer the polls. It really helps us out, and we'll be sharing the data from those polls afterwards. After we're finished with Erin's presentation and our Q&A session, you'll be given a survey for feedback on the webinar. It's really great for us to be able to see that feedback, so if you have a chance and you can stick around, please fill it out, and we'll be giving some more information on that after the Q&A as well. So for now, I'll hand it off to you, Erin.
All right, thanks, Loren. Hey, everybody. I hope everyone's having a fantastic Wednesday. Totally appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy day to sit with us for about an hour and kind of talk through some UX essentials and really how we can best reach our audience. Now, I should say, you guys are probably all obsessing about making a murderer too, so if you're currently watching that or have that on the sideline, I totally get it. I'm totally in it as well, but let's kind of take a break and get into this. All right, so my name, again, Erin Everhart. I'm the lead manager of digital marketing at the Home Depot, so I run our content marketing program. And with that, there's a lot of really specific things that I need to know about who my audience is, because we have a handful of demographics and a handful of different types of audience users. So before we get into it, we're going to go through a lot of information today, but there are 3 kind of key takeaways that I think everyone's going to be able to get across from this over the next 20 or 25 minutes or so. The first one is, in order to get people to your site, you really need to capture their attention, right? There's so much content noise out there, and so you have to capture that attention and really make yourself stand out if you want to get them to your site anyway. Second takeaway is, once you actually get them to your site, what are you going to be able to do to keep them on your site, right? You want to be able to keep them engaged so they continually become customers. And then last, we have to test, right? No one gets it right the first time. Our customers' needs and wants are constantly changing, so we always have to test to kind of stay fresh and optimized. So before we get too much into the nitty-gritty, let's start off with our first poll, if you guys kind of want to take a quick second to answer that. So what is your top work-related New Year's resolution for 2016? A couple different options there if you want to go ahead and select that.
There you go.
Okay, so go ahead, Loren.
Oh, yeah. So what are your top New Year's resolutions for 2016? Research and understand your customers, make my website more user-friendly, establish a testing schedule and budget, try this whole internet thing everyone is talking about, or finishing the making a murderer.
Finishing poll now. I'm glad to hear there's a solid 6% who want to try this whole internet thing, and you guys are doing a really good job already by going to your first webinar. So I think you're already nailing it for 2016 if you're trying to do the internet. Not surprisingly, totally understand. Most of the responses are coming back researching and understanding my customers. Right? They're a complex, different segment, and I hope that over the next kind of course of these 20 minutes, you'll be able to get a better understanding of how you can do that and what they're really looking for.
So we have 75% of you that have voted thus far. Let's try to make it 80% or 85%. So I'll do a quick little countdown. 5, 4. Oh, we're at 79%. 83,
80.
ah,
You guys are
81,
the best
3,
attendings ever.
2,
If I could give you all awards, I would.
1. Okay, I'm about to close the poll, so if you haven't voted yet, please do right now. And
84, come on.
close at
85.
85%. Okay,
All
so
right,
here are the
big
results.
win.
Oh, look.
All right. So, the first thing I really want to talk about is capturing people's attention, right? So, there is so much content noise out there right now, and there's so many different things that are going on. And I think the last stat that I read was, something like 3% is, or 3 seconds is the average attention span that a user has, right? They're going to look at your site, they're going to look at your content, and if they're not seeing what they want to in 3 seconds, they're going to peace out and go someplace else, right? So we have a really unique and difficult job in order to just capture our attention in the first place to separate ourselves from the noise. I had the privilege of seeing Ben Parr, who's the author of Captivology at South by Southwest last year, and he talked a lot about the art of capturing people's attention. And there's a couple of things that kind of really struck it to me. I was saying, hey, these are perfect ways you can integrate into your digital campaign. So first, so you want to be able to, went ahead, surprise them with the unexpected, right? So instead of just giving them a gift for no particular reason at all, people are going to be more excited and they're going to be more tied to your brand if they aren't expecting something in return, right? So instead of saying, hey, sign up for my email newsletter and get 15% off, give them that 15% off after they've signed up for your newsletter or after they've downloaded your white paper or your content. Now, the glory of this is they're not going to expect anything. They're going to remember your brand more because they're like, oh my gosh, remember this brand? They gave me 15% off for doing literally absolutely nothing at all. And that's great. But the bonus, of course, is that you're actually going to get people who want to read your content and not someone who's just in it for the offer, right? So surprising them with the unexpected is a great way to be able to capture those people's attention. So be a little disruptive. So I love this campaign. In 2011, on Black Friday, the biggest shopping day of the year, right, the mecca for retailers, Patagonia came out and said their Common Threads initiatives, and they were saying, hey, don't buy our products because of the amount and the toll it takes on the environment and the environment to be able to use these resources to make our products in the first place, right? The biggest shopping day of the year, Patagonia is telling people, don't buy our stuff. And it was a huge risk for them, but it was also extremely successful, right? Because they disrupted the norm. People saw this and they remembered it and they thought about it, and it also increased sales something like 32% over the next 2 years. Now, if you're going to do something about this, it needs to match your brand specifically, right? So Patagonia, their brand is literally about the outdoors. If the outdoors weren't there, they would not exist as a company itself. So when you're thinking about things through this, hey, what can I do and what's part of our mission and values that's really going to be able to cut through that clutter? So you want to be able to establish your reputation. So in 2015, there was an Emory study that came out that said people will listen to more so than someone like CEOs or government officials, right? So when you're trying to legitimize your claim or talk about your benefits, if you can establish that with industry experts or even a company technical expert or even people like you, right? Even social influences, people are more likely to pay attention to that because there's credibility assigned to it. Now, it was super interesting because of the same study, they also did a white coat study to whereas, they had a doctor not in a white coat and a regular person in a white coat, and the person, paid more attention to the person who was in the white coat because of that physical appearance of, hey, you have a white coat, you must be more authoritative from there, right? So there's just interesting cues that you can take now. I recommend actually getting a legitimate expert. Don't just have someone feign as an expert, but it's just curious what people think in terms of authority or expert from there, right? So try to establish that reputation in order to get people to pay attention to you. And lastly, and this may sound pretty basic and pretty generic, but you want to be human when it comes to whatever copy or content or messaging that you're putting out to your users. We pay attention to people and brands who pay attention to us, right? It's a very common thing, and it's just in our DNA. If you are not paying any attention to me, or if I'm trying to pay attention, or if I'm trying to give you something and I'm not getting anything in the back, I'm not going to keep putting my effort and time and resources into being your friend or try to engage with you, right? I mean, the same thing goes with celebrities, right? So if Kim Kardashian tweets back to you or Justin Bieber tweets back to you, everyone is super excited about it, right? I had Dave Matthews tweet to me once, and I literally fell on the floor. I was so excited, and I felt like we were friends after that. So the same aspect goes with brands too. You don't want to talk in terms of just, services and features that you're giving, like what's going to benefit your actual end user, right? Be human in your copy, talk directly to them, respond to them on social media, because that's giving them a more connected feel to your brand. Okay, so we talked about ways to capture people's attention, right? So kind of some key things of saying, hey, I need to get people to my site in the first place, right? So once you have them on your site, that's the step one is complete, but the job is not nearly finished, right? We actually have to figure out how we want to engage our users, because bored users will never come back, right? So once you get them on the site, what are you going to be able to do to keep them engaged so they ultimately become customers and they ultimately become repeat customers, right? Like, I don't want a window shopper. I need you to actually complete my call to action. And when I think about it, and when you think about it, it's pretty simple, right? The more engaged your users are, the more likely they are to convert, right? So bored users, or if they're not interested in your content or interested enough in your products or services, they're going to immediately bounce back and so go someplace else, right? So the more engaged your users are, the more likely they are to convert. Okay, so what keeps users engaged? There is a fantastic video from Susan Weincheck, who is a behavioral psychologist, and there's a bit.ly link right there that you can go to. It's probably about 12 minutes long, and it's the 7 principles that make your site more engaging. And she talks about the 3 kind of feelings: persuasion, emotion, and trust, and how you can use them within your actual landing page and site design to engage your users from there. And I don't want to go through all of these, but there's a couple that really, really stood out to me that I think that you guys are going to be able to enjoy. So one, don't give your users too many choices, right? We've all kind of seen something similar like this. We are overwhelmed with the number of choices we have available, but we don't want to give them too many choices, because what happens is they end up won't choosing anything at all. And this is really interesting because it goes against complete normal thought, and also it goes against what consumers typically say, right? Consumers will say, oh, well, I want to see every choice out there so I can make the most educated an educated decision possible. But what happens is if they have all the choices, they don't end up choosing anything at all. So Sheena Iyengar did this study, I think back in the 90s, it was a while ago, and she had jars of jam, right? And she was at a grocery store. And on one table, she had 6 jars of jam, and then on another table, she had 24 jars of jam. And while the table with more jars of jam attracted more people to stop by, 60% to 40%, it only surfaced about a 3% conversion rate, right? They were overwhelmed with the number of choices that they have. So think through these things when it comes to putting them on your website, right? Don't give them everything that you could possibly offer. Think through about what is going to be most attractive to them, or what do they need the most at that particular time. So next is people listen to their friends, right? We are all just sheep, myself included. We crave and we need that social validation to make sure that we are making the right decision, right? Right service. What have other people thought about this? And we have all done this. We've all read reviews and testimonials or Q&As on Amazon or Home Depot or ModCloth, whatever site, because you want to see how has this person or how has this product or service also affected somebody else, right? We listen to our friends, but not even just our friends. We listen to people that we don't even know, right? So half the time when I'm reading reviews and recommendations, I don't know who these people are going from there. It doesn't necessarily have to say, hey, Erin, you're friends with Loren. Loren would also like this too. But if I see that there's reviews from similar people and what I'm currently doing, I'm paying attention to that, right? We know that reviews and recommendations come at such a benefit for e-commerce sites, because we know that 90% of consumers are researching that before they're making their buying decisions, right? So that's where you really want to think through of how can I incorporate this type of social validation throughout my site, and not only just on my site, but throughout the entire shopping experience, right? So it is reviews of particular products, and it is, 50 of your friends like this, you may like this too, but also think through about where they're coming out of the customer journey. So from at Home Depot, you'll be able to see all of our reviews based off of where you're at in your current shopping experience, right? So you're on Google and you're looking for chalkboard paint, and we've implemented all of that schema.org right up to be able to show how many star reviews are going on there. What's the average star rating? How many reviews entirely? There's 98. How much does it cost? What's that price, right? So even when you're just browsing, we've incorporated those reviews in that first touch point, right? And then they come to our site, and then they're able to maybe see, hey, I know I want chalkboard paint, so these are all of the different products of the chalkboard paint, okay? So now they're able to see not only all the products, but those reviews are also still within there while they're browsing all of the products to select which ones they want. And then ultimately, when they come to that PIP, when they come to that particular product, those reviews are still there as well, because we're getting people across no matter how they enter our site, and also because they're going to want to read those reviews at different times when they're looking on our site, right? Now, we've also implemented a question and answer section, which actually I'm finding provides more benefit than just reviews, because these are actual questions and answers that people are looking for, right? So that's when they're getting that, hey, what is a real life application of this? Okay, so next, you want to be unavailable, right? So everybody knows FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. The struggle is very real. It's a total real thing, and it's a great marketing tactic for us to use. 3 left, or limited time offer, or 1 time only, right? If something is unavailable, or if something it's perceived to be scarce, right? People automatically assume that it has more value. Retailer sites, Banana Republic gets this for me every single time, because I'll get emails from them that say 1 day only, 40% off, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I have to buy this sweater that I've just been dying to know, right? Because I don't want to miss out on something that could be good. Now, the beauty of that is you don't necessarily only have to have this one limited time offer, or only have to have a one-time sale. People aren't actually going to know the difference, because case in point with Banana Republic, I'll get an email saying, hey, 1 time only, 40% off, but then a week later, I'm going to get another 40% off sale too, right? So with Home Depot, we do this by integrating how many of a particular product is in stock at your specific store, right? So we know that our website, Home Depot's website, is a vertical and a medium for driving people into our store, right? We want to get them into our store. So not only are we showing you, hey, this is the store in your area that is closest to you, we are showing you how many are left in stock and where exactly in that store you're able to buy this, right? So those are quick wins that you can say, hey, don't miss out on this great deal on this programmable thermostat, excuse me. You need to be able to get that now, because there's only 3 left until we're completely out of stock. So then finally, when you think about engaging people, you want to ask for a small commitment first, right? You would never immediately ask someone to marry you upon meeting them for the first time, right? So instead, build up those larger commitments with some small commitments at first, right? So you would never want to, commit your users or customers to receiving every email on the hour for the next 18 years of your life, right? But hey, maybe they're interested in receiving monthly information from you at first. And if you find that they're engaged with those monthly emails or monthly content downloads or whatever it may be, that's when you can start increasing that commitment over time, because people are going to grow loyal to you after that, right? So asking for small commitments first will help build that engagement and build that loyalty over time. Okay, so we talked about ways that we can capture people's attention to get them to our site, right? That's step 1, right? We have all these people out here, we want to be able to get them to our site. So we figured out we're gonna be human in our copy, right? We're going to surprise them with the unexpected. We know what we're going to be able to do to capture their attention. We then know, okay, now that I have them there, these are things that I can do to keep them engaged. We're going to really focus on reviews and customer testimonials throughout our entire buyer journey, right? We want to be able to not give them so many choices from there. We're going to ask for small commitments first, right? But ultimately, we got them there. They may become customers in the first time. How are we going to test? And more importantly, what are we going to test to make sure we're continually staying fresh, because their needs will constantly change. So before we go into the testing, let's start up with our second poll. Make sure I still have some people out there paying attention. So poll 2, why aren't you testing more? So 1, I have no idea where to start. 2, I have no budget or resources. Or 3, my site is already perfect, right? Or there's another reason. What's going on?
Cool. So we have the poll launched. Thanks everyone for voting. Just to let everyone know, we had a little bit of an issue with GoToWebinar, and we ended up ditching the video feed, hoping that that would improve on the audio side. It looks like that's working, so that's great to know. Maybe it's a byproduct of El Nino. Um, and,
We're not that interesting to look at anyway, Lauren, so I think this is a much better way.
absolutely. Let's see here. 66%. It'd be great to hit 85 again. So please get your votes in now. I'll give you a couple more seconds to vote. And it looks like I have no idea where to start is leading the pack.
I am glad to hear that nobody put my site as already perfect because I know you would be blatantly lying about
0%. That may change in the next couple of seconds.
it.
So we have 75. Let's shoot for 80% this time. Give everyone a chance to answer the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get your vote in now, or it's going to be too late.
Don't do
And
it. Don't miss out.
that's 79%.
Oh, 79.
So not bad. So I'm going to share the
All right,
results
I'll
real
take it.
quick.
Yeah,
55.
so,
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
55%
I was just
say
saying,
they have
not
no idea.
surprisingly, it sounds like most of you are have no idea where to start when it comes to testing. So, let's dive into what we're going to be able to do about that, right? And that's a common, not having a good place to start or no idea what to test. It's a common problem, right? It's happening. It's a struggle to kind of get started. And I hope that we can talk through some of those and figure out, hey, this is what I need to start with my testing plan. So, all right, so why do we test, right? So we test because we cannot rely on industry standards or best practices. We test because what happens or what works for one customer group, Home Depot's customer group, is not necessarily going to work with another customer group, right? It's not even going to necessarily with another customer group, even if we're in the same retail space, even if you're in the same industry, right? We can't rely on those industry standards or best practice. We also test because sometimes a little clarification never hurt anyone, right? So what I think of as a four-door hybrid could be something totally different from what another person thinks of a four-door hybrid. And you see this all the time when it comes up to it, right? So a little clarification never hurt anyone, and that's why we want to test. And when you start thinking about testing, you want to ignore your gut, right? You're not testing something because you have a gut feeling that something's not working. You're testing because you've seen something in your data that's causing a hiccup or a struggle of people to make it through your entire flow. And you also want to ignore your hippos, right? Your highest paid people, highest paid person's opinion, right? And that's a hard thing to do because C-suite and executive or really even anyone within the business is going to think they know exactly what their customers work, right? But the reality is you are not your customer, right? You are too close to the business. You almost have too much tunnel vision within the actual business to be able to understand what is actually happening, what users actually may be able to see. So case in point within the SEO industry, right? SEO professionals are not Google's target audience, right? We know so much about Google and so much about the SERP layouts, but that's not even remotely the majority of people who are using Google, right? The majority of people who are using Google still probably call it the Google, right? So you cannot you cannot rely on that gut feeling or based off of, oh, I already know what my consumers want, right? So when it comes to testing, you want to start small. So Jacob Nielsen, who is he's a founding principal of Nielsen Norman Group, who's kind of one of the fathers of UX, he said the best results come from testing no more than 5 users and running as many small tests as you can afford. 5 users will uncover 85% of the usability problems in your site. And that's a common misconception is that, well, I need 100 different users to come test my site, or I have to gather all of this information until I can tell, hey, what's really going on, but you don't need to be able to do that, right? You can really start small with a handful of tests with no more than 5 users to really uncover what's not working currently on your site. And also, when you're testing, you want to test often. So you don't want to go throughout an entire site build or building out this elaborate piece of content or interactive or whatever it may be, get to the end of it, put it out in front of your users, wait another another 6 weeks or so to determine, hey, while you gather that feedback, and then you have another 6 weeks or so to make the changes on that feedback, right? I mean, think about that long cycle that you've already put yourself out there. So you really want to test often throughout builds and throughout smaller pieces of that so you know what's actually working while you are currently working on it. And then most importantly, you want to test one thing at a time, right? So we've all heard kind of that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? Testing is the exact same thing. You don't want to go in there and change your creative or your headlines or your wording or your color or your CTA all at one time, because then if there is a lift, you're not going to know what actually resulted in that lift, okay? So test one thing at a time when it comes to setting up that testing plan and schedule. Okay, so the biggest question, naturally, and the biggest hurdle that people are having is, where do you start when it comes to testing? And I think there are 4 or 5, maybe 4, things that we're going to go through of good places to start for your testing. Headlines are one of the best places when you're to start if you're just getting into new testing. So I'm showing a couple screenshots throughout the next couple of slides that show the original, right? So could you use a free plan for promoting with social media? And then the test, yours is the only newsletter that I actually read. The result is 24% increase in conversions just by changing that headline, right? And the reason why that worked is because it conveyed benefits, not features, right? So what makes a great headline? Having maybe saying, how is this going to benefit my users, right? Don't talk about all the things that they're getting. Talk about things that how it's going to make your life, your users' lives easier, right? You want to keep it conversational. We talked about being human in your content. This is one of the exact places where you need to be able to do that, right? Keeping it short, too. We know people don't have a lot of attention span. We know people don't want to read through paragraphs and paragraphs of text, right? Keeping it short, 5 to 10 words, is really going to be optimal when you're really capturing those people in. Same thing with social proof and FOMO, right? So that headline that works, yours is the only newsletter that I actually read, had each of those things into what makes a great headline. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your headers on your content or the headlines in your actual page. Those are things that you want to be able to incorporate within not only your headline, but I think your content in general. So you can also test your wording of your call to action, your CTA. And what we're looking at are different variations of call to actions that have worked across a handful of different websites, right? And this is, again, why we have to test, because each of these different call to actions have worked for their respective clients and have worked for their respective businesses, right? So there's small differences in wording that could play a drastic increase on your users. Something as small as request a quote versus request pricing, right? Subscribe versus sign up, learn more versus read more, shopping cart versus shopping basket, right? Those are small, slight changes that could result in a higher conversion rate just from changing those small wordings. So when you're also thinking about calls to action, you need to think about the placement of your call to action too, right? So where are we actually getting people to go to that landing page or that entry point for them, right? So we have a content piece right here. The original is going to be on your left. It's a long form content piece, right? Because it's a complicated program. This was done a couple of years ago. We revamped that. We added some images up front, and we pulled that call to action, that get a quote, right? A very strong call to action up top. It resulted in a 64% increase in conversions, right? So once we actually did change the call to action is when we got deeper into figuring out, okay, where are the content can we actually massage maneuver as well, right? There it's from taking that action with your lower and your shorter headline, right? Where we implemented anchors throughout the content, so it's not just this huge, big, long content breaks. They can click on what they're actually looking for. Those are all things that you guys need to be able to keep in mind when it's thinking about where do I want to place my call to action. So also when it comes to placements, when you're thinking about the images on your sites, so images will serve as visual cues as to where people should look, right? So people will look where the images are looking, and this is represented great in this visual here, to where these are eye tracking studies, right? Heat maps. So when the baby is looking directly at you, right, we're naturally going to get drawn to the baby, right, or puppy, dog, whatever you want to do. But you're not actually seeing the most important content, right? Users aren't reading the content that that the business wanted them to read. Whereas when they changed the image and had the baby pointing to where we want those people to look, people obviously still went to the baby, but there was so much more engagement on the content itself of where they want to be able. So people are reading the content, right? They're completing the action of what the business wanted them to do. So forms is another great one to test. And with forms, it's tricky because, best practices or industry standard has kind of, we've grown up thinking that in order to have a really well-functioning form, we want to be able to put the fields, directly on the website. We want to be able to have only 4 or 5 fields that they sign up, make it a strong contrasting color with your CTA on there, right? That's kind of natural best practices for forms. But in reality, there was a client here who did a test from there, and they took the form totally off the site, right, off the landing page. They had to then click through the landing page to go to the other form, and there was 60% more signups just from the removing the form on the page, right? So this is, again, why we can't rely on these industry standards or industry best practices when it comes to testing. Because what works for the industry, or what has worked for the industry, may not work now. It may not work 5 years later. It may not work 10 years later. It may not work 60 seconds later, sometimes, I feel like, right? Because people are naturally getting savvier and more educated into how the website is actually going to be able to use. So, but ultimately, as we go through all of this whole thing of how we want to be able to capture people's attention, what we want to be able to do to engage them once they get to a site, what we want to be able to test them, the whole goal of this whole thing is to make your users ecstatically happy, right? We want to make your users the happiest users possible, because every $1 invested in UX can yield up to a $100 return, right? Those are odds that I like, right? So the happier you make your consumers, the more invested they're going to be with your brand, the more engaged they're going to be on your site, and likely the more money they're going to be able to spend because they're more interested from there, right? Okay, so there's a lot of information. I really appreciate you guys sticking through me for the full 25 minutes. I know it took a while, but again, the 3 takeaways that we really wanted to focus on. In order to get people to your site in the first place, you need to capture your attention. You have to do something to break through that content noise, right? They only have 3 to 5 seconds, and they're going to move on to something else, right? What are you going to do in that short time frame to capture people's attention to get them to your site? All right, so once you get them to your site, we have to engage them if we expect them to become customers for life, right? We want to be able to not show every choice we have, but show the correct choices that we need for them. We want to be able to make small commitments at first, right? We want to be able to show that scarcity or that playing off that kind of FOMO aspect, engage them to become customers. And then, most importantly, we need to be able to constantly test our pieces out of our content or different areas of our website in order to stay optimized, because industry standards will always change, our consumer preferences are always going to change, and we have to stay up to date with that, or they will get sucked into something else and leave you for one of your other competitors. And that's it. And I think we have a good amount of time for Q&A. Is that right, Loren?
Great. Yeah, we sure do, Erin. So thank you so much. That was fabulous, and thanks for putting up with our technical difficulties as well. Seems like we got most of that fixed. So we're going to open up things to Q&A. We have some questions that have come in already. If you haven't had a chance to ask or submit your question yet, now is a great time. Erin, I'll give you a chance to catch a breath before we get started. So here's a question from Cherie L. What are your marketing recommendations for service-oriented businesses like law firm or consultancy that takes on clients for consulting or service-oriented hours, but doesn't necessarily have a potential for coupons or specials? Going back to some of your examples for on the coupon side, Erin, any tips there on how value or a sense of urgency or whatnot can be implemented into marketing for a service-oriented company?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a former life, I was working for an agency, and part of that I was marketing to marketers, right? So B2B is definitely a little bit harder than it comes to B2C. And I think one of the biggest things is focusing on how you can create content that will ultimately make their lives easier, or trying to answer those questions that you know people are having about your particular service, right? So if you are, a lawyer and you're trying to be able to get people, or like a personal injury lawyer, right? So you can go on and use things like Uber suggests to find the constant questions that people are having after they've gotten into an accident, right? Like what's going to be those next steps from there. You can figure out what are those people are searching for, create content that answers those questions directly, right? So you're able to create things that saying, hey, we want to help you through this entire process when it comes to you just got hurt and you need to hire a lawyer. These are the things that you need to be able to keep in mind from there too. Home Depot does this a little bit also with our pro side of our business, right? So we don't necessarily offer them coupons to our pros and the contractors from there, but we're giving them content that will make them do their jobs easier, right? So different ways to use these new tools that they're looking for. Or we're showing them how to make their business practices more efficient, right? So it doesn't necessarily just have to be a kind of one-time offer or a 15% off coupon kind of thing. You're going to have to think through like what is that service that I'm offering? What are those questions that people have about my service? And then I can create that content that answers those questions specifically.
Yeah, it's great on the content side too, because it really gets into informational marketing, right? So when you spend the time to put together the content, you can always utilize that content, say in the form of an ebook or email informational series, where someone can sign up to get your free ebook that has that answers a lot of the questions that someone may have on their mind when they're looking for an attorney or they're looking for a marketing agency or whatever it may be, and then continuously follow up with more content, which helps to build trust with that individual. So then when
Yep.
it's time for them to take that call of action or possibly buy the paid version of what you're giving to them for free, they're already there, they're already in the system, they already love you, and chances are they're going to act upon that.
Yeah,
Um,
and webinars are
but
actually a really great way to play off like the scarcity aspect with not like a one-time offer or 15% off, right? So this was the one time we're doing this webinar and when we were able to generate those people to come to it, right? So there's also that kind of scarcity or FOMO aspect too when you're thinking of events or kind of live video broadcasts.
absolutely. So here we go. How do you balance SEO optimization with UX testing in headlines and content? For example, if your example with a page with a headline that has a customer testimonial, how do you balance the higher engagement with efforts to increase the visibility of the page on the SERPs, such as adding topical keywords?
So that's a great question, and an effort of full transparency, that's something that we're still figuring out within Home Depot as well too. Because as everyone may know, right, you can test for UX in things like VWO or Optimizely to say, hey, I'm going to send this percent of traffic to the control and this percent of traffic to the test to see which one is going to be able to have higher conversions, but you don't actually know what's going to happen to your SEO or your search when you launch those because we can only test SEO in a real-time environment, right? So knowing that we're still thinking through the best way to do that, my recommendation would be when you're building out those tests for UX to keep in mind those best practices that help optimize your search engine, right? Or for SEO. So having your title tag, make sure your keywords are in there. When you write content, absolutely make sure your keywords are on there. Don't tie or hide everything behind JavaScript, right? Don't hide content on there. Don't have one just large image. Those are our SEO best practices that we know help optimize a site. So if you're thinking through those things when you're creating UX layouts that you ultimately want to test, make sure that you design those tests knowing that you're going to have to make sure this works for search engines as well. Now, in terms of the headline question, there have been tons of, and there's a lot of debate in terms of, do the H1s or H2s actually carry that much weight from an SEO perspective, right? And there are some tests that show, yes, it absolutely does, and then there are some tests that say, oh, who actually knows? My personal belief is that if you have a great headline and you can't incorporate a keyword in there, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world, right? Because there's other ways you can put that keyword without your content or your title tag that will have stronger signals to search engines than just in that one headline, right? But those are also things that you can kind of keep and moderate when you launch the new headline, because you've tested something like that in VW or Optimizely. You saw that this headline got 25% more conversions. You launched it live on the page. If nothing happens to your rankings, that's great, right? We move on. But if you see a number 1 to number 5 ranking immediately after change, those are things that you're going to need to go back and implement within your CMS as well. It's definitely a balance, and I think there's things that you can keep in mind. But unfortunately, and unless Loren, a new cool tool that I don't know about, like we can't test SEO unless it's in the real world at this point in time.
Yeah, you really have to throw it out there. But one thing I did notice on your HARP loan example page where the content was quote unquote massaged to be updated and also add the conversion button, there was an H2, what looked like an H2 subheadline added, some changes to the content, and some changes to the title, which looks like on that specific page, it simplified the headline, it simplified what would be the SEO title, and added more relevant content into the overall page itself. So, which led me to thinking about, well, sometimes when you are fighting for budget, to maybe revamping one page may not cost much, but when you're talking about thousands of pieces of content or hundreds of pieces of content, if you want to redo that content for an SEO perspective, maybe kind of mixing that or sneaking that into an internal proposal to get budget granted to redo that content for a conversion optimization perspective really helps. On the same note, like you said, with testing out different headlines with Optimizely, not only does that help kind of gauge how people are going to react on the site, but it also gives you a chance to kind of test out different calls to action that can be utilized in your title tag or description, because the conversion starts, or the choice to make the conversion really starts in the search results as well. So if you're seeing that a specific headline or call to action is getting more results on the landing page or on the Optimizely powered page that you're throwing out there and testing, you can integrate that into your title altogether. So for example, if the pre-existing title is something like, the down low on HARP 2.0 loans and other information from yada, 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 and you found that something like, the ultimate guide to understanding HARP loans dash do you qualify was getting more click-throughs, it also might help get more click-throughs directly from when people are searching on Google, and still keep those keywords in the title. Does that make sense, Erin?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Cool. So that was actually a really great example. I was taking a screen cap when you're doing that. And just to let everyone know, we are going to have a video of the presentation available for distribution, and should have the slide share available for distribution as well. Quick question on email. Do you think email campaigns are a good way to increase loyalty and engagement?
Yes. Did you want me to expand on
Yeah,
that?
let's go.
Yeah. Short story answer, absolutely. Because what is the first thing that people do when they typically wake up is they check their phone, but what they do on their phone is they check their email on that phone, right? So I think that everyone needs to be able to start building an email list and start leveraging that capability, because as overloaded as we have become with email, and I know that everyone's striving for inbox zero, it is still a extremely effective way to reach targeted messages to things and people you already know about in your consumer database, right? Because you'll be able to email, unnamed person, and you can see that unnamed person clicked on this particular product or this particular service, right? So for Home Depot, let's say we sent them out an email and it says, these are 3 different projects. You can remodel your kitchen, let's remodel your bath, or let's build an outdoor entertaining area, right? I know that person A clicked on, hey, I want to remodel my kitchen. Immediately, I know that not only is person A, I have this demographic information about them, but I know that they want to remodel their kitchen, right? So I'm able to build on top of how much I already know about my users, because I can track to see what they're clicking in my emails. So I think it's an extremely effective way to keep your people engaged and to be able to really segment out content that you know they're going to be interested in, right? So then I can funnel that person A, who I know clicked on kitchen remodeling, funnel them into an own separate group that talks more about specific things they can do with their kitchen, right? I can give them galleries or inspiration of really cool kitchens. I can show them different products that they want to be able to think about. I can say, hey, if you want to do this on a budget, what's the good, better, best option when they're trying to remodel their kitchen, right? It's a really great way to get that targeted content to the right people, as well as making sure that people still remember who you are throughout the things, right? Loren, I think you were talking about that. It's not maybe an immediate action when it comes to email. So few, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, yes, I want immediately this chandelier from this email that I saw, and I'm going to go buy it right now, right? That's not going to happen from a customer journey, but they're going to remember Home Depot from the targeted emails and the content we've sent them about this kitchen remodeling and these lights. And when they're ready to make that chandelier purchase, they're going to remember the Home Depot brand, right? It's a really, really effective way to stay connected.
Absolutely. And not only that, but you know, with Facebook custom audiences, you can drop your email newsletter lists into there to run an ad campaign on Facebook that complements what you're sending out in your email messaging, and or parse different segment groups. So if you see that 8% of your list clicked on the chandelier offer, you can drop that list of people that clicked into Facebook and serve that custom audience, or possibly even a lookalike audience with similar chandelier ads, or maybe like ads for other things that are
Yep.
someone will be looking at if they're buying a chandelier, like crown molding or pillars or something like that. So yeah, email. I mean, email is incredibly important, and it's all at the end of the day. It's building your audience that you can continuously market to, and hitting them where they're at online. And I'm also a firm believer from the SEO side that targeted traffic to your site and engaging targeted traffic to your site, which engages on your site, helps with SEO. It helps with your bounce rate. It helps with time spent on site, pages viewed, everything else. So the more targeted your email list, the better. Okay, here's a question about branding. So Greg J would like to know, do you need to have a common branding theme in order to build content? Example, having a fun voice for a teen clothing brand, or possibly a more professional voice for a B2B business, or say, someone like a Mike Rowe being a type voice for Home Depot. Um, do you look into brand voice when you're putting together your content strategies?
Yeah, I think you have to, because the biggest benefit of having that type of brand voice and really establishing who you are and what you want to say is the consistency you're going to be able to get across not only all your content pieces, but all your different channels. So we know that people aren't going to engage with your brand and business just on one channel, right? They're not only going to look at your stuff on Facebook. That's not only what they're going to do. They're going to look at your content and all of your different types of marketing collateral across your Facebook, their Twitter, through email campaigns, on the website themselves, maybe in webinars, there may be YouTube videos, right? I mean, there's so many different types of ways we can access content, and so many different things of content out there, that the best way, you have to establish that type of consistency so people know what they're going to get when it comes to your brand, right? They know what they can expect when it comes to Home Depot. They know that they're going to be, an everyday low price leader. They know they're going to be able to get the how-to information they need. They know that they trust that, right? There's consistency across the messaging that we're putting out. So within that, I think you have to have an overall brand voice as you're building your brand and building your audience to establish that consistency. But there is, within that main brand voice, still opportunity for everyone to have their own individual style, right? So I have my own individual style, but it all ultimately rolls up to what's the main thing that Home Depot wants to get across, right? So I don't think by having a brand voice, you kind of everyone has to say the exact same thing or everyone has to sound the exact same thing, but that's kind of the overarching like guiding mission that you need to keep in mind. And then within your individual writers and your individual brand enthusiasts and public figures, right, they can have their own style and personality and spin on things that still kind of roll up into that main high-level brand voice.
Yeah, it's almost like with the Home Depot in the brick and mortar example, the Home Depot itself has its own brand and brand experience, but there's a different brand experience for the contractors that go into the store and for people like me who like are going in there on a Saturday to get a screwdriver or something like that, right? Or whatever. So like the contractors have their own entrance. They have like they go into like the lumber section. They have the flatbeds, everything else. Then I go into the section with like Christmas decorations, and I feel all great. And I want to put up my and I could buy a staple gun to put up Christmas decorations, and I feel awesome as well. So there are different experiences, and you can mimic that in your online marketing as well. Okay, quick one, this will be our last of the Q&A session. What do you specifically test at Home Depot for website engagement and metrics? So let me kind of rephrase that. Like, what are some of the most important engagement metrics that you look at, Erin, from a content perspective? We really got into conversions a lot, but anything else across the board you look at?
Yeah, great question. So metrics are going to be different based off of what your main goal is. So as I'm sure, just with everybody else, you have a whole set of data and a whole slew of metrics that you can kind of dive into to see what you want to do to be able to prove your point, right? And Home Depot is completely the exact same. But I will choose the metrics that I need to tell what story I'm trying to tell. So if I am trying to use a piece of content to get people to my product pages, right, I'm going to look to see, hey, did this content drive people to that particular product page that I'm trying to promote, right? So that's a metric that I'm going to look at if that's the story I'm trying to tell. Or am I trying to see, if I'm looking to see how much money did this content piece generate, or how much money did this particular video generate, right? I want to see, okay, did it result in an actual person, putting that item in their shopping cart and converting, right? So all of those things through multi-touch attribution are things that we can be able to track and measure from there. Now, we're still getting better at tracking those metrics as it relates to in-store as well, right? We know that online does not exist in a bubble, and the majority of Home Depot's business, the vast majority, is done in our brick and mortar stores, right? And through some testing with Google, we're able to kind of figure out a little bit in terms of what are our online activities doing to measure in-store impact, but we're not perfect there yet, right? So other metrics that we're looking at from an online perspective are things like if I'm saying, hey, are people reading my content? I will look at engagement or page views or even scroll. Did they scroll to the bottom of the page and click on things that were listed from there? Things that we also test are going to be, are they adding it to cart? We've tested, having how many stores are in stock there, right? Like before we put anything live on our site, we're testing it to see, hey, what's this actually going to do for our conversion rate? And we're measuring that against a whole slew of factors from there. And we have a great UX and testing team that manages kind of that whole process in terms of, hey, this is what I'm trying to do with this new feature or this piece of content. These are the metrics that I want to look at for there, whether it's page views or impressions or, driving people to page views of particular products or conversion rate. And then we measure that based off of how did it actually perform.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Erin. We have some other questions that we won't be able to get to this morning, but we'll be following up via email and via Twitter with a lot of the answers to the questions. So again, thank you again, Erin Everhart of the Home Depot, for presenting on today's SEJ Marketing Think Tank. It was really great, and it was great to have you at SEJ Summit 2015. Looking forward to next year as well.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Just to let everyone know, we're going to have a survey after the webinar is over, but our next Think Tank webinar will be on January 20th with the team from Page One Power on real link building in 2016 and scaling human effort. So thanks again. We're going to be closing today's Think Tank webinar. Please, again, stick around for the survey at the end, and we'll be sending out updates from the webinar to everyone who attended. So thank you very much.